Hello, Instagram family. Happy Friday. Happy Friday. Happy Friday. On this snowy Friday evening, I am so excited to come back to you with another candid conversation, faith in action. And I'm so excited for the guest that I have tonight who is going to share with us a story, her narrative around faith in action, what it looks like, family, connection, faith, love, joy, triumph, trials, tragedy, right? All of those things encompass faith in action. And for those of you joining this conversation for the very first time, I started Candid Conversations because I love hearing people's stories. And most importantly, I know how important it is for us to share each other's narratives because I believe in the power of storytelling as a tool for healing and transcendence. And so if you haven't had a chance to check out the folks that we've had on in the past couple of weeks, go to IGTV, check out the stories, listen to the narratives while you're washing dishes, while you're cleaning. It's also available on YouTube. The link is in the bio. And without further ado, the fantastica Zazy Lopez Esquire, who is joining us today. Hello, Zazzy.
Hi, how
How
are
are you?
you?
Oh my goodness, I'm so excited. Oh, excuse me. Oh my goodness. I think I broke a curtain back here. So first of all, Zazzy, I just wanted us to just jump right in. Thank you so much for saying yes. You know, coming on a public platform like Instagram isn't easy for anybody, right? And for a topic such as this one, where we are literally sharing faith in action, and faith in action connotes so much to so many different people, right? And I was so inspired when one of your colleagues, a mutual friend of ours, reached out and introduced us. And right away, when she introduced us via email, first of all, I love meeting people. That's why I do the things that I do, because I love engaging and hearing about people's trajectories, their journeys. And I love hearing especially the stories where people are able to glean moments of triumph and glean opportunities, even in moments of disappointments, even in moments of uncertainties, right? And certainly my way of giving back to the world at this time is candid conversations, because I find that the different people that have come on have shared just such private parts of who they are and what they bring to the world, that literally people are healing because of the stories. So I want to thank you in advance, because I already know that this conversation is going to do just that for the perfect somebody, right? Welcome to those of you that are on. I'm going to go ahead and introduce Zazy Lopez Esquire, who does phenomenal work in the field of diversity, equity, and inclusion. She is a single mom of two beautiful twin boys, and so she's very busy, because I have one boy and I'm like, and you have two at the same time, at the same age. And so let's get right into it, because I don't even want us to waste any time. I want you to share with us, you know, what inspired you to be a yes on Candid Conversation. And then tell us a little bit about who you are. Oh, it looks like it's lagging a little bit.
I think it might be good now.
Okay, we got. Hey, that's a pause. All right, I was like, oh, I wasn't sure if it was time for a freeze dance. You remember back in the days, you would go to the parties and there was like a freeze dance. I thought it was time for a freeze dance.
So long as I don't turn out like Teddy Riley and have issues, we're all good.
Oh my gosh, right? That's already saying our age, right? We're already saying our age. Because some people on here is like, who's that? Right? So I don't know if you said something earlier, but it froze. So I asked you what inspired you to come on tonight, and who are you and what do you contribute to the world? Tell us a little bit about that.
So what inspired me is I have no idea. No, vulnerability. I think my story is one where I think there are a lot of women who are, and I say particularly women, but anyone who's struggling through a situation. And how do you manage that? How do you lead through that? I mean, we're all right now in a collective storm, right? We all have a boat. Some have a yacht. Some are just doggy paddling through it. But we're all in a collective storm, right? And we're all facing it together. And how do you navigate whatever is unexpected that comes your way? And we have little unexpected things that can happen. But what about the job loss? What about the loss of a life? Divorce. What about divorce and the loss of a life at the same time? Which is my story. And so how do you navigate that? How do you lead your family, since you're the CEO? I'm the CEO. I'm the momager of Lopez Household LLC. Right? This is my home, right? And so I manage all the ins and outs of this home. And how do I lead my family through this challenge while also having time for me to grieve, to mourn, to feel all the feels, and to heal? And having to do both at the same time. And so I think Joyce Mayer said it when she said, in order to have a testimony, you need to have a test.
Come on. And, we're getting right to it.
And I feel like, faith is important to me. And I do think that God uses your situations, if not for you, but to help others. And so if I can inspire one person who's out there struggling to, who's facing a challenge, that they can overcome it, then that's one good thing, right? That's come out of this, out of many. So that's the reason why I came on. I use humor as a way to get through nerves. So there's a lot of smiling. That's my nerves. And a little bit about me. I am Puerto Riqueña, New Yorker from the South Bronx. My family's from Ponce. I am the proud mom of twin boys who are 9 and remote learning. So I am currently a chef, a resource officer, an executive assistant, the best executive assistant, school monitor, you name it, I am. Plus, on the side, I'm a civil rights policy advisor. So
I love it. On the side.
That's my job. That pays for everything, but mainly I'm mom right now. And so I am also divorced. That's not who I am, but that's part of why I'm here in the narrative. So I'm a single mom. And so that's important because as a single mom in this pandemic, you are basically everything, be all, end all. Like your brain is everything, right? And so it becomes particularly challenging when you have to think about them, think about yourself, keep everyone safe. I am basically Sandra Bullock in the Bird Box. Like, don't take your mask off. Don't turn around. Don't touch that. What are you doing? If I ever take them out. So it's a lot of the trying to keep yourself and your little ones safe. That becomes a bit draining and exhausting as a single mom. So
wow. And when you give that example of the Sandra Bullock movie, for those of you watching, if you haven't seen it, it's such a fascinating movie. And those of us that are caregivers of little people could attest to that journey of like, shit is like, the world is falling apart, but in your own little world, you're navigating emotions and feelings and safety, right? And joy, because there gets to be joy in the process of this, right? And so,
Mm-hmm.
so walk us through the journey. So what's so fascinating, Zazzy, what you don't know is that, you know, when you and I connected, the last time we connected, you gave me so much food for thought, right? Like I was definitely in praise and prayer after our conversation, because you helped me to remember things that I had blocked out when I was going through my divorce. And you also helped me to remember my resiliency, my power, and all of the things that I didn't even remember that I had experienced, because you talked about your journey and you used a word that it spoke to me in ways that I know it's going to resonate with people around that will be listening, that will be forwarding this along. Do you remember the word that you used when you shared about, it starts with an S?
I feel an S, shame.
Absolutely. So could we start there with what you
Mm-hmm.
experienced, right, in your divorce, without, you know, giving details. We don't want to put our laundry out there, right? But it is what it is. And I love that you said, this isn't who I am, because for many women, divorce becomes who they are. And for a while, I think I experienced that. But you said it's part of who I am. It's not who I am, but it's part of my story, right? Part of my narrative. So walk us
Mm-hmm.
through that. Like, how old were the children? You were juggling a couple of different things. You just shared with us that not only were you dealing with that, but then something else. So walk us through that journey.
So there's this gospel singer, Torrin Wells, who sings this song, Hills and Valleys.
Yes.
And sometimes you're on top and then you're right on the bottom. And it can happen overnight. And, you know, mountains are not straight, right? There are little hills, ups and downs that go along. And so I had, I was in Puerto Rico for my dad's 80th birthday. And my sister, brother, and I had talked about going. And I was like, the spirit had moved me when I went to Puerto Rico for Christmas that year to go again. Every time I go, to take my kids, because my mom is ill and they loved it. So why not? And so we surprised my parents, surprised my dad, surprised my mom. We had a great weekend. And in fact, it was the first time all five of us, so I have an older brother and older sister, all five of us were in Puerto Rico together,
Wow.
because I'm the youngest. And so, you know, we didn't have the money. We're from the South Bronx. We didn't have the money. So I either went with my mom or my mom and dad, but we all didn't go as five. And so this was the first time all five of us are there with my sons. And I remember my mom giving me this big hug saying, you know, thank you for surprising me. Thank you for bringing the boys. And so then we come back. And I remember my ex-husband and I were having issues. And it was something totally petty about, not petty, depends on how you see it. He drove my car, but he didn't put gas in the car, and I had to go at really early in the morning to drive my sister to the train station. So that meant at like 4 in the morning, I had to go to a gas station. The New Yorker in me, the woman in me was like, yo, you could have put gas in the car. And I'm not one to raise issues like that. I just let him slide. But I was like, yo, you could have put gas in the car. Like, what's going on? And I was like, I think we might need some counseling. Like, it was clearly, I didn't say the counseling due to the gas, right? It was clearly a long list of things. And he came back that night and said he wanted a divorce. And that didn't bother me as much because that was his feeling. That was how he felt. And I was like, well, can we work on it? Like, thank you for being honest, but can we work on it? And he said no. And I think that's where I was like hurting. Like, why not? Yeah. Like, why don't you want to work on it? I mean, we're supposed to be forever, right? Like, we should at least try. And so that night, I look back on it now, and it's kind of like when um, things come in threes. And so I called one person, didn't answer. I called another person, my sister, she didn't answer. And I called my sorority sister, who I figured she was up because she had a, I was like, she's probably feeding her newborn right now. Maybe she's up. Um, and she finally answered, and we talked. But then after we hung up, I'm in this house by myself with my babies and him, and where do I go? Who do I turn to? And I've prayed. And so while faith has always been important to me, I'm not that, like, I wasn't going to church. I mean, I opened the Bible I had a class in college. I had a children's Bible, but like, I wasn't in the Word. I definitely wasn't calling it the Word. So it was like definitely, mustard seed. And I just fell. I was like, I need you now. And for the next few days, that's how it was. And it is shameful. Like the fear. There's this fear. There's this, you're ashamed of, like, you feel like a failure. Like this, we should be working on it. So what do we do? And I automatically went into research mode. How do I save a marriage? What do I need to do? Putting it into action. My 5 strengths. Like, right there. Professionally and personally being put into action. But the thing is that responsibility is huge for me. And so the very next day, so we had a colleague who was leaving, and I was responsible for making Star Wars chocolates. And we had the chocolates because she was a huge Star Wars fan, and she was leaving. And so I had to go in the office. My old colleague, who's a friend of mine, calls me, and he's like, why are you going in the office? And then I break down and cry and tell him. He's like, why are you going in the office, sweetie? Stay home, heal. I was like, I have the Star Wars chocolates. Locuras, pero I went. I went to work, and I don't know if people were blind that day, or clearly the spirit was like, no one's going to see that your eyes are red, your nose is like big red, your eyes are puffy. And I brought the Star Wars chocolate, and we set it up. Everything was nice. She gave hugs on her way out. And I later told her, what it was about. And I was like, that hug meant the world to me. Wow. Especially in a time when no one can hug. That hug meant the world, because I didn't have family around. Wow. I didn't know who to share this with. So that was challenging. Mm-hmm. And then coming back home and being mommy. Yeah. And then finding that space to grieve, finding that space, like, where do I turn to? I turned to a family friend who is a minister, and he was awesome. And he said 2 things, prayer and therapy. And so I went for therapy and prayer. Every prayer line, sign up, email, lo que sea, lo mandé. I was like, pray for me. I need all the prayers. Wow. And it was a certain level of vulnerable anonymity. To be able to call into a prayer line, they didn't know who I was. I called in angry. I called in sad. I called in tears, ugly tears where barely a word could come out my mouth. And these people just prayed with me. Wow. And that freed me. It was freeing. It was healing. Wow. I went to therapy, and I didn't like it, because why am I paying you all this money to cry on your couch? So I found another therapist who I liked better. She's actually one of my sorority sisters, Yesenia Vialta, who was like, awesome. I was like, look, I want work, because that's who I am, right? Some people need to share. I need to feel like I'm doing something. Like, I'm a control freak. So that's where my control felt like I'm doing something. And so she was awesome. She was the bomb. And she said, okay, we're going to work with you on this. And the first book I read was The Gifts of Imperfection by Brene Brown.
Yes.
Talk about laying a foundation on letting go of shame and being vulnerable and identifying the Miss Fix-It girl in you. Like, why must you fix everything?
Mm-hmm.
Like, why, some people just want to share without you saying, I have an idea.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe that's you too.
Mm-hmm.
Like, maybe you need to just sit without having all of these ideas and like feel all the feels and find that space to let go. So that book was very groundbreaking. Little did I know, durante todo esto, my mother, who was ill, and she had been ill for over 18 years. She fell in Puerto Rico on the escalator, and she was in the hospital. She and my dad. So my dad just turned 80.
Wow.
My dad walks away from this like nada, like one of those superheroes in a movie. Like he didn't even want to go to the hospital. He's like, no me importa, don't take care of me, take care of her. Because they were married by the time she passed away, they were married for 50 years plus, I think. Yeah. And so he was like, I'm not important, she is. And so she was in the hospital, and it was hard because I'm like, how can I share? Like, I'm going through this big hurt, and I don't want to share this big hurt. And then the fall, she got an infection. The infection impacted the liver. And I remember clear as day going to watch Wonder Woman, the first one. This was in 2017. And leaving the theater, my brother had tried to call me multiple times. I didn't answer because I'm in a movie theater. And he sends me a message that my mom is terminal. She had 3 months to live.
Wow.
And so in the middle of this movie theater with my then sister-in-law who was so supportive, and her daughter and our au pair, I broke down and cried, like ugly tears cried, like in the middle of, I didn't know anybody there, tears. And so I come home and I have to figure out how to manage all of this.
Wow.
And
how
so
old were your boys at the time?
They're 9 now. So it's 20, they were 4 or 5. They're 5.
And that's that age where they don't care about nobody but themselves, right?
Well, esto la cosa, they were about to start kindergarten.
Wow.
And so I had to figure all these things out. Like, I'm trying to figure out the family situation, and now my mom is ill. And I went away on a work trip, and I was like, I prayed with this at my kids' church. They had a prayer group, and I was like, well, I can't come in because I have the kids. So they prayed remotely. See, we can do remote prayer. This is in 2017. We can do remote prayer. They prayed remotely, and then they were like, the Spirit tells me that you should really tell your mom. And at that moment, I was like, no, if she dies, not sabiendo nada, thinking that her daughter is perfectly fine, that's much better.
But could you tell me why did you make a decision, just so that we could understand the intricacies
I felt
of
like I didn't want her to worry about me. I didn't want to burden her with she's hurt. Like, why should she be burdened with my novela? Right? Yeah. I didn't want to burden her. And so, and the truth be like when I was in law school and she was sick originally, like when she was first in the hospital, no one told me. Because she didn't want to interfere with my education. Wow. Education was so important to her. And so when I found out, I waited to spring break to come back and see her, and in law school. And my friends were like, why don't you go now? I'm like, because if I leave now in the middle of the semester, before spring break, she would feel it. And I'd rather not, right? I waited. And so I didn't want to tell her. I wanted her, I didn't want to burden her.
Mm-hmm.
But it was the best advice, because had I not told her, the shame and guilt would have kept me from even engaging with her in her final months.
Wow.
So when I told her, so I finally went to Puerto Rico to see her after I got back from work. And when I told her, of course, my mom cracked jokes for days. And she was like, "You're good. You'll find someone else. You're beautiful. It's all
Oh,
good."
oh, that's beautiful.
And that vulnerability allowed me to be able to talk to her during the rest of the summer without fearing, accidentally letting out, this secret, right?
Mm.
And it's funny because the times, I worked on a case. So I used to work in the Civil Rights Division, Department of Justice, and we used to work. I used to go to Puerto Rico once a month,
Wow. Nice.
and well, it was working. So everybody in their little like bikinis, and I'm in a suit. And of course, it's black, right? I'm a New Yorker, so I'm like, everything I own is black and gray. Uh, so, and I only visited her. I saw her twice because I was struggling with, oh, I've been gone for a week. The guilt, mommy guilt. I need to be home with my kids. And I look back and I'm like, dang, I could have used that time. One weekend would not have cost much.
Wow.
But the mommy guilt of wanting to go back home.
Mm.
And so over that summer, I'm there managing a divorce
Wow.
and a loss. And it's easier for me to tell my bosses, like, yeah, my mother's terminal. She has several months to live, 3 months at that.
Wow.
Versus, yeah, I'm going through a divorce and I might need to take some time. Both of them is a grief.
Yes.
You're
Yes.
grieving in both. Both are hurt deeply. Um, and you still grieve. It's been 3 years. Not that I grieve, like the divorce happened, but you grieve the idea. I will never make the 55 plus. I mean, uno nunca sabe. I could live
No,
to
we hit, right?
150,
Uno nunca
right?
sabe.
Like, there's still time, but unless we're living in biblical times, the chances of that is highly unlikely. And so you grieve those moments, right? And you grieve the what was and the dreams that you had. Um, but you need the time,
Mm.
and to not, and you don't feel comfortable with that, right? I did share it with my direct supervisor, primarily because I needed a lawyer. And I was like, "Do you know of anybody?" I
Listen, we
didn't know
gotta
of
maximize
anyone.
our resources. Okay.
She's totally awesome. She's very supportive. She's awesome. And all the lawyers I knew were civil rights lawyers. Unless I'm getting beaten, like I didn't have someone in family law. And she was very, very helpful, and she got me a name. And so that was me having to be vulnerable and sharing something in
Mm.
a professional setting, but I needed the help. And what was I going to do? Like, I needed to reach out. And so I did. And I think what it showed me that summer was, oftentimes as Latinas or as women of color, we feel like we carry the world on our shoulders.
Yes.
And
Yes.
we do. We have so much that we have to do, and we have to present in so many ways. And we wear so many masks.
Mm.
And it is challenging and it's exhausting.
Exhausting.
And so that moment where you need to be vulnerable, figuring out who you can be vulnerable with is important. Who you can share this with. And I found people who were amazing, like women in my sorority who were supportive, who were remotely supportive, right? Like they weren't living here with me. They weren't in Maryland. One just wakes up at the god awful time of like 4 or 5 in the morning. So when I wasn't sleeping and I would send a message, she's like, "Well, I'm up now if you want to talk."
Wow.
um, that was needed.
Now, Zazzy,
And I really,
I wanna pause for a moment because you mentioned something so poignant, and I wanted to slow down and acknowledge you because sometimes, and I'm guilty of it, we go through things and we tell the story like, "Oh, I was walking down the block and da da da," right? And you were literally experiencing the grief of a divorce. You took faith and reached out to people for support. And not only that, then you reached out to strangers for support through the prayer lines, right? And then you
yes,
were dealing with the grieving of your mom, and then the connection, that reconnection of feeling that mom daughter connection around something like a divorce, right? And that you were able to bring down that wall, tap into that vulnerability. And it sounds like I'm hearing you say that God connected you with the right people at the right time to offer you the right supports. Because having gone through
yes.
divorce myself, I remember certain people saying certain things, and I knew I needed to connect to my God self, because if I would have listened to what they said for me to do, I wouldn't be talking to you right now, right?
There are those moments. You got your catch a case friends and you got your wisdom, right? You need wise counsel. Do
Yes,
you want your catch a case
yeah.
friend or do you want your wise counsel?
So
And yes.
yeah, so I want to acknowledge that and what you shared with folks around the importance of connecting with that vulnerability, that it may not happen right away, but that it was part of your ability to grow through your situation, right? Because we don't get over a divorce or get over a loved one's terminal illness, but we can grow through it and love through it. And I love that you
Yes.
acknowledged that you can look back at your situation and say, oh, had I done things a little differently, maybe I would have done this. But that we're not beating ourselves up about what we didn't do, but that we're acknowledging there's choices that I could make moving forward, where I could spend time with family, or make different decisions, even about how do you talk to your employer about such a sensitive topic. Like the way you described that was just so beautifully done. Like being able to express it, but also, still doing the work. I mean, you took your laptop everywhere from what you were describing to me.
Yes. I think the the funny thing, it's not funny, but it's funny now when I look back on it. When my mother passed, I had to go into work because I left my laptop and there was a project that needed to be done. I think coping mechanisms for me is my responsibility. Like being responsible and and not letting things fall through the cracks. That's my coping mechanism. And so I remember going into the office and my boss was like, why are you here? I was like, I left the laptop. Same way, why did I go in the day after I heard that my husband asked for a divorce? I had the Star Wars chocolates, right? I was responsible for something. And if I didn't do my responsibility, that meant I needed to explain why. So it was like, here's how I'm going to cope. And I remember finishing my project, sending it to my boss, and he was, and the other boss, and he was like, you shouldn't have done this. Thank you for giving everything you're going through. I appreciate it, but take time. Part of that responsibility was that my kids were starting school, kindergarten. So the meet and greet was that day. So it was like a Thursday, I think. And I remember the day I found out my mom passed because I had the worst headache. And I tried to reach out to her at lunch, but my cousin was like, she's not really feeling well. I was like, okay, well, I'll call her back later. And I had the worst headache, so I had to migraine. So I had to turn off all the lights at work. I finally feel better. I take the train, I get in my car, and my brother calls me, and I'm like, I can't really talk loudly because I was still in fog. But I get to say, okay, mami, pues bendición, te quiero, and she said the same. And I'm home and my brother tells me she passed. And the next day was, I couldn't go home the next day, right, to New York. And that's because that Thursday was the meet and greet at the school. I was going to meet the kindergarten teacher. And so I told my sister, I was like, well, after I meet the teacher, I will come home and get in the car and go to New York, and then we can go to Puerto Rico together on JetBlue, the last flight out, right?
Right.
And I had to do all of that with the ex, right? Like we had to go, right? We're as a family. And and it was a beautiful day, and the kids wanted to play in the park, and we took the kids to the park, and like they were all excited because they were going to kindergarten. And yeah, I had to manage that while when the kids were young, we couldn't afford we couldn't afford daycare for twins, so we had an au pair. It sounds, when I say that, it sounds so bougie, but like cost benefit, it was more affordable. So, and the women we had, because if they had a 2-year service, were awesome. My boys called them sisters and would tell people I have 5 sisters, and I'm like, I did not birth 5 extra kids. And so while all of this is happening, the week my mother passed, that weekend, a new au pair had just come in. I had to work with her. The kids were about to start school. And I really do think the Lord puts people in your when you need them. Yeah. You don't know it when you first meet, but there comes a moment when their presence is so necessary. And I remember the first time I went to Puerto Rico to see my mom after I found out she was terminal. And I was in the airport at Orlando because coming from Baltimore, I had to fly from Baltimore. There was no direct flights to Ponce. No, not like New York where you can get the direct flight. No. Yeah. I was in the land of happiness, right? And my life is not anything but happy at that moment. And I'm like trying to call the school for counseling, because they had through the church, they had a counselor in case I had any questions. And I have a really good group of girlfriends from law school who we see each other on weddings and bridal showers and baby showers and reunions. And so, but it's like my sisters, right? And I remember being in the middle of the airport of happiness, texting them and letting them know about my mom and about what was going on. And they were like, what do you need? And I was like, I just need prayer. And they circle you with prayer, right? And it's just to know that I can turn to a group of women like that and say, this is what I need. And know that it's going to happen. And know that there is support and know that there is love. That is really that's why I went to where I went. That's why the Lord led me to all of those places so I could meet those women. The Lord led me to UPenn, not just so I can get a law degree, but so I could meet these women who at that one point in the middle of Happy Town Airport, when I needed love and support and just uplifting, I had them. And that's really, I firmly believe that God puts people in your path for a reason, and He'll know it when that time comes. And the way I looked at that summer, I felt like I was going through a storm building a boat. Wow. I had the base of the boat. Yes. And I had all the tools, but I needed to build my boat. My base was my mustard seed, right? I had a mustard seed of faith. I always believed. But now it wasn't just praying to God to get, the Freddy Kruegers away, right? The nightmares. Like when I was a kid, I said my Lord's Prayer and the Rosary whenever I had nightmares. Like, you memorize that. I'm a Catholic. You memorize that and you go with it. Right. But I was so far removed. And I remember in college, wanting to go to law school, and my friends say, pray on it. And I'm like, well, the Lord and I, we're not on good terms right now. I can't just go to a friend and be like, I know we haven't talked for a minute, but can you let me go to law school? Like, that's how I felt. And he was like, try. And so I prayed. And not only did he was like, okay, I'll send you to law school, but I'll do you one better. And there I go, the pen. He showed up and showed out. And so there are definitely moments in my past where you reflect back and you can see God's work, right? God's hand in motion.
Wow.
And that summer was really about reconnecting. And so at the start, I was like going for self-help books and stuff like that. And Tony Robbins really said one thing that stuck with me. He's like, there's two types of people. Those where stuff hits the fan and you're like, okay, this really sucks. Like, this truly, truly sucks. But how are we going to get through it?
Right.
Or this really sucks and I'll never get through it. And I was the former. I'm like, this sucks. Divorce sucks. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. No way around it. There's nothing about it that doesn't suck. But how am I going to get through it? Losing a mom sucks. That hurts. It hurts badly.
Wow.
How am I going to work through it? And working through it is the answer. I think people have this misconception that God comes here and he's a vending machine or a genie in a bottle. You rub it and get 3 wishes, right? Or I put my $1, I want my, $1.50, I want my bottle of water, right? No. And yes, you can pray I prayed circles around my house and my marriage did not get saved. It ended. That door was closed. There was a reason for it. Absolutely. Right? God answers everything. It just isn't always yes. Sometimes it's a wait. Sometimes it's a no. Like, yes, he could say no to you, right? But he didn't come here to just wipe away, like, what's happening. He came to, like, he's there to help you through it. You build your boat. Here are the tools. I gave you people, community. Wow. I gave you, here's music. Music was so, like, what you listen to feeds your soul and feeds your mind. Self-talk is completely important. How can I lead my family? Remember I said earlier, I'm the CEO of this house.
That's right.
Lopez Household, LLC. I am the CEO. How can I lead them if I'm like, I have negative self-talk? If I'm not healing myself, if I'm not working on myself, if I'm not getting through that process, I can't be what they need me to be unless I take care of myself. And so I focus on praise and worship music that really inspired me and connected me to the word. And then something was missing. So I started listening to sermons, and I remember there are moments in my story that are just astounding. I remember because my boys were about 5 and they were twins, so they had twin talk. I understood them. Most people didn't. And I was like, as soon as they go to school, they'll pick it up. And I'm listening, and it was by myself. I was like, I don't have anyone to help go with me to go get some olive oil. I need certain olive oils for my cooking. Hey, I cook. And I needed to cook. And so I'm driving with them an hour out, and I'm in tears. And on our way back, I hear William start singing, "There is power in the name of Jesus."
Oh, my goodness.
And I'm like, like, you said something? And he's singing it very clearly. So clearly that tears go away. We go park in my house, and I'm like cheering, and we pump it up loud and start singing in my car.
Wow.
And Alexander's just like, whatever. The other twin is like, whatever. And I spent all summer trying to get him to redo that, and he wouldn't. Not on video. And I wanted him to sing for my mom. And the weekend before my mom passed, my sorority had a friends and family barbecue. And for whatever reason, I shared with one of my sorority sisters about the divorce. And so she puts me on this sermon that was phenomenal. And so that gave me like strength.
Wow.
And as we get in the car, William says, Mommy, you can now videotape me singing There is Power in the Name of Jesus for Puerto Rico
What?
Grandma. He calls her Puerto Rico Grandma.
Puerto
And
Rico,
so,
grandma, qué lindo.
yes. And so we videotape him singing it, and then Alexander's shouting it. And so we send that to my mom. And according to my cousin, she played it over and over and over again, listening to him singing. Right at that moment. And then Alexander de la nada says, Mommy, can you play Jesus Loves Me? I'm like, what song? I start looking for it. I can't find it. And then I was like, you mean the Whitney Houston one? He didn't know who Whitney Houston was. So I put that song on from The Bodyguard.
Right.
And he's like, yes, that version. So when they were babies, I used to hum the song. I would try to sing it, but I'm like, I'm nowhere near Whitney. I try. In the shower, I might sound like it, but like I would sing it to them. I didn't realize how much of an impact that song had just hearing it on Alexander. And right there, that ride back, he wanted to hear it over and over again.
Wow.
Then to find out that my mom passed, to learn that she's passed, it was a way that, the Spirit wants you to know you're not alone. God is here. Jesus loves you. You got this. So as I'm building this boat, it's the music. Wow. It's the community. I think I said earlier how that hug with my colleague on her last day meant the world to me. One of my prayer groups was at the church across the street. And all of those women were amazing. Every time they would see me, they would give me hugs. Wow. They were and they ranged in age, even to like a grandma. It just felt so warm and inviting. And they had this charismatic group that met every Wednesdays. So I started going to the charismatic group. They supposedly would bring out musical instruments. It was predominantly African, bring out musical instruments. My brother and father were still in Puerto Rico during Maria. Wow. My sister was nervous. My mother had passed away before Hurricane Irma. Wow. And so I go to church. And that day, they had all of these instruments that reminded me of home. And it reminded me of just like bomba y plena and like the musical instruments of Puerto Rico, like the diaspora. And I'm just sitting there feeling it in and like being at peace on the day that Hurricane Maria just struck Puerto Rico. Wow. And so to then, my sister was nervous, but I was like, look, the Lord knows I'm not Job. You can't take my mom, you can't take my dad and brother. Like,
you was like,
come on now.
You were like, stop playing. We good.
we can't do this. But it was a work in progress. And that year I had to be cognizant of what I needed to heal. Right. And I needed to the church, there was a local church that had a Surviving the Holidays. And they had 3 different groups. One was on if you lost someone, if you were grieving a loss, a divorce, or you're struggling with mental illness. And I chose to go to the grieving a loss. Because at the end of the day, people talk about divorce as it is we talked about this like it's a death. Yeah. It is a loss. Yeah. But to me, it's like The Walking Dead. It's a zombie. You got kids, that zombie is always coming back. Divorce, all the divorce hurt, the triggers, siempre va a pasar, right? Because you can't fully let that, you can let it go, but then it comes back. And it's another issue that comes up that you need to confront. You're working through. You're consistently working through it. And going through that divorce, Surviving the Holidays, grief for family loss, right? We created an ornament, and it was so like it was relaxing. It was like letting go. And we put the ornament on the tree. It's on the tree every year. In fact, you know how people have elves on a shelf? We have Puerto Rico grandma in heaven. Like, because that
Oh,
Christmas,
that's
because
beautiful.
from the Christmas before, you know, she gave them gifts. I just brought them gifts, and I was like, it's from Puerto Rico grandma. And every year, like, I leave a little message for the boys from Puerto Rico grandma. And it's it just helped them to connect with her in a different way.
Yes.
That William had a school project, like, what do you miss the most? You know, because in the last year we're all in, you can't see relatives. The relative he missed the most, my mom, Puerto Rico grandma, and he
Ah,
wrote her a letter. And that's because I love the holidays. We love the holidays. So I make her presence known for the holidays. And
mm,
I chose to focus on that healing rather than focus on the novela that is a divorce, right? And all the other things that come with it. And then the following year, in 2018, I focused on healing completely from the divorce by going to what is called divorce care because I wanted to identify my triggers. I
mm,
had therapy, but there are still triggers, you know, things, landmines. It's always like it's like you're peeling behind the onion, and
yeah.
one moment you think you're fine, and then all of a sudden you're breaking down crying because
Yes.
algo nuevo pasa, and you need to work through it. And it's not a bad thing. Like,
Mm.
it doesn't mean you're not over it. It doesn't mean you haven't let go, but it means that there's still work to be done to fully heal.
Now, what is divorce
And
care? Because I'm not familiar with that. Sounds amazing.
so, divorce care is this program through, it's oftentimes through a church where it's about 13 to 15 weeks, and you're going through topics like forgiveness, anger. It's almost like you're in a group with other people who are going through a divorce or who have been divorced, and how are you feeling? And so being able to connect, being vulnerable with other people, letting go of that shame. I think the biggest part is letting go of the shame of divorce.
Yes.
And as a woman in faith, like you're like, but we're not supposed to get divorced, right?
Right. Mm.
Yeah, but it happens. And how do you get through it? Do you just
Exactly.
get
Oh my
stay stuck there? You move forward.
Zazy, you had, I mean, when I talked to you a few weeks ago, I was just so inspired. And you poured into me in ways that you will never know. I'm trying so hard to hold back my tears because you are talking to those folks that are going to hear this, that have maybe experienced loss in the form of divorce, in the form of a loved one passing, to hear your resilience, your strength, your openness, your obedience to what God put in your spirit, to contact the prayer communities, to invest in your healing in the form of prayer, therapy, and connection with your children, in connection with the people around you, in connection with your family, all the while working full time, parenting twin boys, right? And sometimes we need to hear that all at once to embrace what God can do in your life when you're open to that possibility. So I want to thank you for sharing all of those things because, you know, that there's some tools that you shared tonight that it had me thinking like, oh, you know what? I don't think I healed that part. I need to go back to that part. Me and God need to have a talk after this, right? You know, and with love, right? And I know that I love your smile and your humor is so infectious. I just, you know, and I can only imagine the joy and the love that exist in your household, right? Knowing that God is at the center, that God is steering that ship. He's the contract manager of that boat that you're building, right? He's telling you where to put what, where, how, what sea to be in. And so I want to just acknowledge you for the powerful woman of God that you are. because in a world where so much negativity lies, where everyone has stuff to say, when you have all kinds of shows out there that lead you to be someone who is, harboring hate and anger towards, all kinds of situations, you use that, and it's such a testimony. And my question to you is, when you gonna write that book? The book that I needed to read when I was going through my divorce.
That's a good idea. One thing I think people should remember is that, and I think this is what helped me the most. Forgiveness is for you.
Yes.
When people say forgive, it doesn't mean you're a doormat. It doesn't mean you got to be friends afterwards. You can forgive and let go and walk away. But it's really about confronting whatever are those issues between you and whomever. And that includes yourself. Grace is amazing.
Grace.
And oftentimes we talk about forgiveness of everyone else, but we can't look in the mirror and forgive ourselves.
Wow. Say that
and
again.
there are things we need to be able to forgive ourselves. Like, we're not perfect. And, I look back on my marriage and I reflect back, and there are some really great, I grew in that marriage. And I traveled and I learned and I think differently. And it took me a while to think about what I like now. Is it because of him or is it because of me? And like trying to find who I am now.
Wow.
39, 40, 41, like over the years, like, who am I now?
Wow.
And who I am now is not divorced of, right? Like, he played a part in who I am now. And so looking back and saying, well, I could have done things better. I should have spoken up more. I should have owned my truth more. So now I'm going to work on that. And it's not looking back with regret. It's looking back with reflection.
Ooh,
so that you can keep moving forward.
That is powerful.
And so, because I think oftentimes people look back and it's like, oh, I regret. The only thing I regret, that I tell you, Cindy, the only thing I regret is when I started out in the law firm. I just graduated law school, and it was my first week. And my mom, the church was going to Rome for the canonization of Mother Teresa. And my mother was going, and my mother and I had talked about going to Italy since I was in high school. She even on the DL got my passport because we were going to go, porque, my dad was not going to, he was like, going where? ¿A dónde? But we were 1 or 2 students short, and so we couldn't get the group rate, so we never went in high school. My mother ended up going with my cousin, and that is the only thing I regret. Everything else are lessons learned that I could do better. I could have been better. I should have focused more. Maybe if I really wanted to learn Italian, I should not have been lazing at college and got up for the 8 o'clock class. Todo esas cosas. I don't regret. You just learn. Wow. But that one trip with my mom, because I will never get that back. Wow. So for me, it's being able to look at myself in the mirror and showing myself grace. And forgiveness doesn't happen overnight. People think, I thought I forgave. I should be able to I shouldn't be angry. And it took a situation and a priest to be able to say, no, you're not a super Christian. He didn't say that. My paraphrasing. He was very kind. I paraphrased like, mija, you're not a super Christian. It's okay to be angry. Right. It's okay to have all of the feels. God will meet you there. If you need to throw something against the wall, tíralo. Don't hurt nobody, but tíralo, right? Like, let go of your anger, because if you bottle it up inside, you're going to explode. Wow. So own your feelings, own your emotions, get the therapy, heal. God will meet you in all of those places. Find your space in the Word. You know, sermons are very helpful for me to understand stories. I'm an oral listener. Like I learn through listening. Sometimes I just have to get into the Bible. Like Psalms and Proverbs are very helpful for me. Um, I'm not one of those people. Like I remember I needed a formula for prayer, and te digo la verdad, it's that you don't need a formula. You don't need to know if I stand on one leg and pray like this, y lo que sea, he's gonna listen. Just talk.
Just talk.
He'll listen.
Wow, you gave us, I was gonna ask you what things you want to leave us with, but you left us with like amazing steps on just living life and living it unapologetically, and building relationship with God. I'm going to ask at this time if anyone has any questions. I see there's one question that my sister, Doctora Sofia Pertus, asked. Thank you for being on. If anyone else has a question, put it in the question box. What would be the title of Zazzy's book?
Something about a boat. Quizás building my boat in the middle of a storm. Algo así. It has to be like something with a boat. I can see the image of a boat. Because a storm really is, like, we all go through it, right? We all go through our variety of storms. And sometimes we're there like we're Rose and we're Rose on the Titanic on that board, right? And like there's no room for you. And you just have that one piece of board that you're holding on to for dear life. And other times, you know, it might be something more based off of everything you've learned in life, you've grown in life. And those are all pieces of your boat to navigate the storms of life, right? And so you keep building, you keep growing. Just because you've gone through one doesn't mean you're not going to have another. Like 2017, that was one horrible, sucky summer. But there was joy. You are so right. There was joy with my boys. There was joy. Laughter with my mom. Spending time with my family on my birthday. My boys asked me what was my favorite Christmas. I said I have two. The first Christmas was when they were babies, their first Christmas, and my entire family was there, including my mom, my dad, my brother, my sister, and her tribe. She has 3 kids. You know, they were all there. And then the first Christmas after my mother passed, because everyone was together. And so, you know, the holidays are very important to me. Extremely, extremely important, because it's a time of like reflection and just, you know, connection and love. And one thing, you know, one last thing to leave people with: love. You can speak your truth with love.
Yes.
It might be a harsh, like there's tough love, right? You can be angry with somebody and still stand up and speak your truth, right? But you can do it from a loving place. And as my amazing therapist said, is it out of spite or out of love that you're saying something? And if it's out of spite, you might want to check it. If it's out of love, then share it. And if you need to pray on it, pray before. Look, I wish I would have prayed before I sent my little petty "where's my gas" right email. I still think about that, like reflection of waiting and praying on something before you hit send.
Wow. Yeah. Right.
But you know, it is what it is.
Wow, Zazzy, I want to thank you so much for your generosity, right? Of sharing of your words, of your experiences, and supporting other people in their journey, right? I'm gonna probably listen to this recording about 10 times, because you dropped so many jewels that, you know, when I always listen to the recordings of the interviews, because there's so much that when I'm in it I don't hear it, and then when I hear it again I'm like, what, oh my goodness, that was amazing. And so thank you so much. We appreciate you. Thank you for being you, and I will pray that you will continue to shine your light everywhere that you go. And I can't wait to buy that book and to read it, because, you know, everyone has a story to share, and you don't even realize. And I want to thank Roseanne, the friend that we have in common, for even introducing us. Sometimes we have a gift that God is telling us to do something, and when we're obedient to it, we don't even know who's going to listen to this, where you're going to literally shift their entire trajectory, right? And so if anyone is listening and they know somebody that has a story to share, please DM me, email me, find me. You can Google me. I'm, you know, wherever. And please connect us, because there are stories to be shared that people need to hear so that we can heal as a community. And so thank you so much, and have a wonderful evening.
Bye.